What is up, Packers fans? Happy Thursday. Welcome into this members Q&A. Thank you so much for being here. Of course, I'm your host, Andy Herman. Man, let me just tell you guys, I've said this before, I think, but this is one of my favorite things that I do all week long. There's obviously a lot of time, effort, and energy that goes into preparing the episodes every single week, recording them, editing them, etc. A lot of time, effort, energy that goes into preparing for the radio show, the daily Bleacher Report chats, and then just kind of, scouting the players, looking at free agents, doing all that stuff. And it's all fun. It's all great. It's all enjoyable. But to just get to come for the next hour-ish and just talk Packers with people that want to nerd out and talk about Packers, it is one of just like, it's kind of like after all of like the work that you put in through the course of the week, just sort of an exhale of like, it's just so nice just to, have people that are very intrigued and want to ask questions about the Packers, and let's just chat about it. So one of my favorite things that I get to do every single week. So thanks so much for being here. Looking forward to today's chat. Should have about an hour or so. We'll get to as many questions as we can. I'm usually on our members Q&As. We get to everything in about an hour, but we'll just go through it. And if we get less than that, more than that, we'll kind of see as time goes on, but we'll start right away with John DeSoma. John, thanks so much for being a member. If you had to give a percentage, what would you say is the percentage Goody adds an impact free agent on day one of the tampering period? I can't even recall. Was McKinney and Jacobs day one last year? I honestly don't remember off the top of my head. I feel like it was, but I don't fully remember. I'll say 33%. I'll say a 1 in 3 chance. First of all, usually that day is for like the big name free agents. I think it's just a different market this year. I'm very interested to see who goes on day one. Like, who are those big name free agents that sign right away? And then is Green Bay involved? I could easily see them being involved, but again, salary cap went up at a really ridiculous rate in a good way. But that's going to make it, I think, a lot of funny money out there and a lot of teams spending at a ridiculous level. That could make day one very just not super appetizing for Goody. Very interested to see how he does this, but they have the money to go spend. They need premium players on this team to kind of take that next step. So I'm going to say about a one-third chance that on that day one, we get a big name announcement for a free agent. And then again, it just becomes like who at that point, right? Josh Sweat could make some sense. I don't think Paulson Adebo, even if he was like a day one guy, like it's going to take some time for a team to probably bring him in for a visit and just check on his injury issues, right? Just to make, double, triple check and make sure, see how he's doing from a recovery standpoint. Is a Byron Murphy Jr. going to be somebody that they would sign on a day one? Maybe. So yeah, it gets a little bit harder. I don't think there's a wide receiver. I don't think there's an offensive lineman that they would be doing it with, but I'll say that there's, maybe a 1 in 3 chance. Josh Sweat, again, kind of seems like the guy that would maybe make the most sense of that group, maybe a Khalil Mack, but we're going to have to kind of wait and see. So about 33% chance is what I'll go with. Will, heard the stat Ryan shared on the radio that we only allowed a 100-yard receiver twice last year. I'd love to add talent at corner, but do you think Goot just throws resources at the D-line instead of and or before? I think this is always an interesting conversation to have, right? Of like, would you rather have better pass rushers and maybe not as great corners, but the pass rush will help you so you don't need as good a corners? Or would you rather have better corners so that they can cover longer, which allows your defenders to get more time? It's always kind of those, dog chasing its tail sort of things. But I'm more of the get better pass rushers, and then it's going to help your corners a little bit more. In an ideal world, you have both. I think it's just going to be dependent upon who's available, who they can sign, and just having those conversations, not completely independently, but also kind of independently of like, what's on the corner market? Who can we get in Green Bay? What's the cost going to be? And are any of those good, efficient deals that we would like to make that we think are going to be beneficial for the team? And then at the same time, you're having those same conversations with defensive ends, defensive tackles, pass rushers, and saying, who can we add? What's the price point? And then maybe you get to a situation where you're at a Josh Sweat and say, all right, it's going to cost 4 years, $84 million to sign Josh Sweat. It's going to cost 3 years, $51 million to sign Byron Murphy Jr. Can we do both? Does it have to be one or the other? And of course, they've laid all these plans out already, right? They kind of have an idea of who they want to attack, why, when, how, all those sort of things. They've got a plan in place of how they want to attack this free agency period, and they'll have contingencies off of those as well, right? So if we can get this guy, then who's our next target? If we can't get this guy, who do we move to here? And then we maybe pivot over here. Like, there's always like this if then sort of scenario. So they're going to have every single kind of pathway paved out of how this could go for them and who they really want and who they desire. So I think those are going to be different, but it could be dependent upon who's available, who wants to come to Green Bay. I think what Goody's going to be looking for is good football players who he thinks can ultimately upgrade this team. And then, of course, as he likes to say, it's a 365-day-a-year process. So it's not just that day one of free agency. There are trades that are available. There's the draft that's available. There will be players cut, around, roster cut down time. And, we've even seen like a Laramie Tunsil that was traded, at the end of like cut downs. You'll see somebody, every once in a while, like a big time player that's traded right before the start of the season. Like there are other times to upgrade the team too. So you don't want to necessarily rush into anything that's going to be a long-term poor decision for your team, but it's going to be very dependent upon who's available, who they can get, and then does it make sense for their football team. But I'm always more of defensive line and get that pass rush, but I still think they're going to need some depth and competition at corner too. And I mean, I wouldn't hate it at all if you added a Paulson and Debo, and now you've got a Debo and Nixon and Valentine, and maybe you add in a fourth round pick. Seems about right at that standpoint. If you're going to add to that room as well, bring back a Robert Rochelle, maybe a Corey Ballantyne on a minimum deal, and you still got Kalen King, Kamal Haddon, and like that starts rounding out into a little bit more of like a corner room, right? So I think that could make some sense, but again, it's all going to be dependent upon who's available and who they can sign, and if it's a valuable deal for Green Bay to kind of make. Tyler, how much of the Packers' offensive struggles are on Love versus the line, receivers, and scheme? Oh man, how much time do we have here? I think the ultimate answer is it was all of it. And there's so much that goes into this. There was a streak there of, probably from, what was it? Week 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, a group of 5 consecutive games against the 49ers, Dolphins, Lions, Seahawks, and Saints, where they put up 30 consecutive points for 5 consecutive weeks. And then they played Minnesota, put up 25. Not exactly a super poor performance, right? Put up 22 against Chicago in a game that Love got injured in, and then scored 10 against Philly. The 10 against Philly is the one that leaves you certainly wanting a whole heck of a lot more. In totality, the end of the season, those last 3 games, Minnesota, Chicago, and Philly, left a poor taste in your mouth. But right before that, again, you have 5 consecutive games where you're scoring 30 plus. It's not like this offense went on this unbelievable, brutal stretch where like the second half of the season, they just fell apart and couldn't do anything. So I know we have this immediate connotation of what have you done for me lately? And just the sort of bad taste in our mouth from those last 3 games is going to stick with you a little bit more, especially a 10-point performance against the Eagles, understandably. But I do think it's worth remembering that right before that 3-game stretch, they had 5 consecutive games of 30 points or more. So it wasn't like this, again, lost cause by any means. I think should not be a surprise. The Christian Watson injury certainly hurt Green Bay and what they're able to do. And then I think it's just a little bit of everything. I think it's not one player that is causing everything else to collapse, or a scheme or a coach or anything like that. I think it's everyone just needs to be a little bit better. Jordan just needs to clean up the mechanics to make those percentage of passes where they're errant, where there should be easy completions, into easy completions. I'm not saying he needs to make these all-star Hall of Fame plays where he's making 3 people miss and then throwing cross body and making these. No, I'm talking about you've got a 10-yard in and you have no pressure on you, and you can hit the back of your drop, plant your foot, follow through, and hit that guy in the 10-yard in exactly where it's supposed to be. He's open, hit him, make it easy for him. That's what I want to see out of Jordan. I'm not asking for anything more spectacular. He makes some of those big plays, I think, at a more than reasonable level. It just can the simple stuff be a little bit easier? That's what I want to see from Jordan. From the wide receivers, Ryan Wood, who was also on the show, talked about how if you just took the drops that the receivers had, the easy drops, right? Like the easy catchable ones, and cut them in half, like Jordan's passer rating goes way up. You're talking about one of the best quarterbacks in the league this past year. Just if the receivers caught half of the, dropped passes this past year. I'm not asking for anyone to all of a sudden become a 1,800, yard receiver with 13 touchdowns and, 17 yards per reception. I'm saying, hey, when you've got a wide open pass over the middle of the field and the ball is hitting you in the hands, can you please catch said pass? I'm not asking for anything extraordinary. I'm just asking for the attention to detail and the basics where ball comes to you, you're open, let's make that catch. Or even in a semi-contested catch situation, can you go pluck that ball and make it yours? Those are the things that, again, even at a little bit of a higher level, that's going to make the offense better. The offensive line, I thought there were some communication breakdowns at the end of the year. I didn't think they played with the physicality that they needed to at the end of the year. Thought it just kind of wore down a little bit. That needs to be a little bit better. And again, I'm not asking for a flawless performance from the offensive line where they just never get beat, but it wasn't the same, I thought, at the end of the year of where it was earlier in the year. And I thought Matt LaFleur could have done some things that would have opened some stuff up for the offense. I didn't think it had the same cohesiveness that a normal Matt LaFleur offense did. Felt like they were maybe spamming plays a little bit more rather than having plays that had connected tissue from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. Felt like a series of play calls rather than, again, stuff that was stacked on top of each other of we're going to give you this look later and then come back to something different a little bit later. So I think all of that combined leaves you wanting a little bit more. The great news is that you don't need any Herculean effort from any one person. It's not like Jordan was terrible. It's not like Matt was terrible. It's not like the offensive line was terrible, the receivers, etc. I don't think anyone quite hit the level of expectation this past season outside of probably Josh Jacobs. So if everyone else can just do their 111th and just do the stuff that's expected of them, nothing extraordinary, don't have to be a superhero, just do what you're asked to do. I think if that comes together, and you'd be surprised, you'd be stunned, you'd be shocked at how just a few of those plays, that you're catching a 3rd and 8 that, maybe they dropped this past year, that turns into a first down. You get a whole new set of downs. You get more plays, more efficiency on offense. Your defense is on the field less. You've got more ball control. You'd be shocked at how just those little things completely change. And especially a season overall, in a league overall, where you're deciding things on 2 to 3 plays per game, it really makes a massive difference. So I don't think, again, anything is irrevocably broken. Easy for me to say. I don't think there's anything that, they can't fix this offseason. I don't think you need this infusion of talent on offense, but I think everyone just needs to play a little bit better with a little bit better consistency. And if you start seeing that, you're going to see this offense take off at a pretty ridiculous level. That's the hope. But there's also the chance that this is just who they are. Like, they're an inconsistent bunch of young players who don't put it together and sometimes look phenomenal. Other times look pedestrian, and you don't know which version is going to show up any given week. That's what you have to avoid. So this is a good offense that at times looks great. The great offenses are the ones that look consistently great. And that's where Green Bay needs to get to. Tyler, you are more than welcome. And thanks so much for being a member. And thanks so much for supporting the channel. Always appreciate that a ton. Would you rather trade Jaire within the division for a 5th rounder or to any team outside the division for a 7th? If I could send him to the AFC for a 7th, I'd probably do that in that situation or scenario. I think there's always going to be a tax if you trade him in the division. It just depends. Like, of course, Matt and Goody and those guys are going to know a little bit better of like, is there something legitimately wrong? Meaning, like, is Jaire legitimately a locker room, issue? Like, is it a problem where you're almost thinking like, hey, if he goes to one of those teams, like, it might be a good thing for the Packers that he goes over there? I don't think that's the case, by the way, but they would know that. You're also basically betting on the fact that Jaire is not going to be able to play games consistently. That's why you're moving on from him, other than maybe if there is some sort of locker room issue or disconnect there. So if those are the things that you're betting on, you could bet that they're going to continue to be an issue in Minnesota or Detroit, and that they're going to pay $17.5 million and give up a draft pick for a player that's going to play 4, 5, 6, 7 games for them this year, which you probably don't mind all that much. But if it's me, I'm just going to take out a little bit of an insurance policy and say, you know what, just to be on the safe side, let's send him to the AFC or some non-contending NFC team. We'll take the 7th round pick instead. Goody's usually fine with his 7th round picks anyway. If I need to get up that 7th round pick to the 5th round or something, I can easily do so. It's not that big of a deal. So I'll take the 7th from a different team rather than a 5th from in the division. If you're talking a 4th or a 3rd or something like that, or if you could get a 5th for Jaire instead of cutting him, then I probably take the 5th, because if you cut him, he could go to an NFC North team anyway. So those are different connotations. But in this situation, I'll take the 7th round pick. Jaire's Madden rating is a 91 Madden rating. So yeah, there you go. If anyone's looking at those Madden ratings, Green Bay should be getting something very juicy in return for Jaire Alexander. Thanks for all the great content you and your team put out there. This makes this time of year so much more fun. Can't wait for your My Perfect Offseason episode. It should be coming soon, early next week at the very, very latest, unless we get a bunch of crazy breaking news. In fact, I meant to put together my game plan for the next few days, since it did change up a little bit, but should get a defensive line episode coming up. My guess is, I think Monday will be Perry and Grant. I think Tuesday will be Justice. For some reason, if Perry and Grant can't go on Monday, then that's probably when the perfect offseason will be. If not, you're looking at probably Wednesday at the very, very latest of next week. Do you think the Packers could trade Dobbs this offseason? Ross mentioned hearing rumblings of it in one of his recent daily draft videos. I don't think it's impossible. I don't think it's super likely. There is like a scenario that makes some sort of sense, right? Let's say that they get a Devontae Adams, a Chris Godwin, they trade for Brandon Ayuk, whatever that thing is, right? They go and get a clear number one wide receiver. They do that. They make a big investment at wide receiver. Jaden Reed's not going anywhere. And you look at Romeo Dobbs and you maybe have had those contract negotiations already and they didn't go anywhere. You look at what Khalil Shakir got this past week and maybe Shakir's the better player and you can make that argument. Maybe Dobbs is, you could probably make that argument as well. But either way, it's maybe in that same range and it's just a non-starter for Green Bay. Meantime, some team comes calling and says, hey, we'll give you a fifth round, or let's say fourth round pick for Romeo Dobbs. I think that might be for a 1-year deal left. I don't know. It's probably close. Let's say it's somewhere in that fourth round range, right? If you're Green Bay, you just made a big investment at wide receiver. You've got Dobbs, Wicks, Melton, Heath left. You're probably going to draft a wide receiver at some point, maybe using that fourth round pick. I think you could make the argument that I'll take the fourth round pick. I get to invest in a new wide receiver that, potentially even with that fourth round pick, that I now have 4 years of cheap team control rather than just 1 year with Romeo Dobbs. Romeo's had the concussion issues, which again, other teams are going to be very cognizant of as well. And maybe not be willing to offer as much, which goes into the equation also. But then if you're Green Bay, you have to look at, all right, would I rather have a fourth or fifth round pick? Or would I rather have 1 year of Romeo Dobbs? Now, if Dobbs leaves in the offseason next year and you don't sign a bunch of players, you could get a comp pick in return for him, which is, maybe going to be that fourth or fifth round pick, depending on how much he gets in free agency. So that's a factor that goes into it as well. But I would say not likely, but not impossible either. I think I labeled like 4 players who could get traded. I don't know if I did that on the radio or the Bleacher Report or on the podcast or where I did that, but I labeled 4 players who could get traded. And he was one of them that I think is at least a small possibility for Green Bay. Not super likely, but not impossible. Andy, love these member chats. They are amazing. Thank you so much. John, you are more than welcome. I'll take Jaire for a 7th anywhere outside the North. That was my answer as well. If he went to the Lions or Vikings, he'd have an all-pro season. And if he stayed on the Packers, he'd play 9 games at most. Probably true. I think the Packers will get something for Jaire. A lot of teams have a lot of cap space. Free agent class is okay at best. His contract is short and late round picks don't mean much to a lot of GMs. I think that's perfect calculus, John. I think that makes sense. I think that's probably the case. I think they get something. I'm just not holding my breath for something massive or game-changing or season-altering for Green Bay, but I do think they get something. At what number do you bring TJ Slayton back? If it's like a 1 year, like $3 to $4 million deal, 2 years, like 6, you're probably looking at 1 year if you bring him back. So I think 1 year, 3.5, I think anything in that range, I would probably say, yeah, do it. I think the hard part for TJ is that, you've sort of already shown kind of what you are, a little bit more of a one-dimensional player, solid player. There's nothing wrong with TJ. I like him. I think he's a fun football player. He's going to make almost any NFL team's 5 or 6 man defensive line rotation. Like he would probably play on all 32 teams. So can play in a variety of systems. The issue is that you have an unbelievable class of defensive tackles coming out of this draft. So if you're Green Bay, you're probably not making this huge effort to re-sign him. And that's not going to be a priority at the moment. If you get through the draft and TJ hasn't been signed by that point, and you did not get the defensive tackles that you were hoping for in the draft, and TJ's still sitting out there, then I think it becomes a little bit of a different conversation. But I think for now, if I'm Green Bay, I probably feel very comfortable going into the draft feeling like I'm going to take maybe even 2 defensive tackles. And for that reason, you probably don't need to spend money on TJ Slayton coming back. But if I could get him on a cheap deal, like anything 3.5 mil or under, I'm at least going to consider it because I think that'd be good value. I think he probably gets a little bit more than that on the open market. Maybe it's a lot more than that. I don't know. Depends on what the appetite is for him around the league. But if I can get him on a good, cheap 1 year deal, that's probably where I would consider it right now. It seemed weird to me that the edges played so much better for Barry. Do you think they're easier to chip in Hafley's defense? It seemed like they got more one-on-ones in Barry's scheme. I think there's a lot of things at play here. I think number one is we saw a lot more chipping and helping throughout the entire course of the league last year. It was massively in vogue. I mean, I've talked about it before, but just to kind of try to go through it as quickly as possible. You've got 5 offensive linemen. you've got a tight end and a running back more often than not. Obviously, it's not the same every single play, and it's not always that they're chipping with both on every play, but a lot of times that left or that right defensive end, you're getting the left tackle and you're getting a help from the tight end. So you're getting two players on that. The defensive tackle is getting the left guard and the center on them, at least the center to begin with. Then the other defensive tackle is going to get the right guard, and then the center is going to come off of the other player and help midway through. And then the other defensive end is going to get the right tackle, and the running back is going to come and chip, so that at some point during a 4-man rush, you're going to have two players that are accounted for that player on every single play, and not every single play, but on that specific play, every one of them is going to get, 4 hands on them at one point or the other. And that makes it really, really tough. And it was massively in vogue. So this was not just a Green Bay Packers issue. I've said this before. The Packers last year, let's see. Here we go. Nope. Here it is. The Packers last year, I think this still surprises people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're 8th, tied for 8th in sacks last year. Tied for 8th with 45. And just to give you an idea, the team that was in 4th, the Houston Texans, had 49. So you're not talking about like this massive amount of more sacks than Green Bay had. Like 4 more sacks would have got you in 4th place. I mean, if just Rashawn Gary and some of those defensive ends finished a couple of those sacks, like they easily could have been 4th best in sacks last year. So as hard as it was for Green Bay to get sacks this past year, and there was some disappointment as to the impact that the Packers had, they had 45 sacks, and that is more than, again, the vast majority of teams. The Philadelphia Eagles, their vaunted defensive line, how impactful that they were. 41 sacks last year, had 4 fewer sacks than what Green Bay had. Now, context is important. Green Bay had a bunch of sacks in like 2 or 3 games that really buoyed them, and it wasn't consistent throughout the course of the year. They really struggled against good offensive lines. If you had a good offensive line, Green Bay's defensive front was doing almost nothing in those games. So context matters, but this was not just a Green Bay thing. This was a league-wide thing. It was harder. And the other thing that I will say too is you could tell that this defense put a ton of energy into run defense. The jump that they made in run defense last year is also something that doesn't get the credit that it deserves. They made a significant improvement in run defense, and it was guys like Rashawn Gary and Devontae White. It was the same guys. I mean, Cooper definitely played a factor in this, but it was a lot of the same guys in that front 7 this past year. And guys like Rashawn Gary, Devontae Wyatt, those type of players improving in run defense was a huge reason why. And Rashawn Gary deserves a ton of credit for it, but I think Jeff Hafley does. And what they were focusing on was that, making sure they improved in the run game. Maybe it hurt their pass rush stats a little bit. I think it was probably worth it in the end. But it was a league-wide thing. They weren't terrible at it. They need to be better at it. And we'll see what Green Bay can do to improve upon that this upcoming offseason and season. 2022-2023 classes produce a lot of good but not great players. This is tricky from a team building perspective because you don't know who to sign, but yet you have a lot of starters to replace if you don't. I think these next, this year especially is going to play a huge factor in, who's taking that step. And you're looking for guys to break out. Can they take that next step from good player to great player? If you don't, then you're going to have decisions to make. If they do, then those decisions are kind of made for you. And if they don't, then they take a major step back. Well, then the decisions are probably made as well, where you're not re-signing them. So I think this is going to be a big year for especially those guys that are going to be free agents in 2026, but even the guys that are free agents in 2027, those are going to be, the next year and a half are going to be very, very important for those players. Do you think that the weird way the 5th-year option number works will discourage teams from taking off-ball linebackers in the first somewhat? You think the NFL should separate edge into their own category? I do. It's an easy fix, right? Like, we're well beyond the need for that. They got to figure out something a little bit different with the categorization of that. I don't think it's going to dissuade somebody from necessarily taking a linebacker in the first. If they feel like the linebacker is the best player available, they'll do that and then figure out the rest later. But if it's a tiebreaker, maybe if you're deciding between a linebacker and a whatever, and they're both, there and you have an even grade on both of them, maybe it could be a tiebreaker. But overall, I don't think it's going to be a major, determining factor. Also, in 4 years from now, they might change the determination. So I don't think you can necessarily base it on that. But it is a bummer, and it is something that they definitely need to clean up a little bit. Hypothetical, what would the Packers have looked like if they had decided to keep Devontae instead of Rodgers? Oh, man. we'd have to really go into the weeds with that, because you end up with Devontae, you don't end up with Christian Watson, you don't end up with the extra first and second. So the Quay Devontae thing is very interesting. Jordan plays a year earlier. You take the Broncos trade for Rodgers in that situation, which gets you a ton of draft capital, but that's going to change your outcome. I don't think you have a good year that year, because I don't think Jordan was ready yet. I mean, Matt probably makes it work to some extent, although they had a bad year that year anyway. So you probably end up with a very similar draft pick draft picks the following year. You don't trade Aaron later. So like the Edgerrin Cooper pick doesn't exist. So like there is a just ridiculous butterfly effect in all of this. So it's near impossible to say, but I mean, you'd have to take a very fine tooth comb and go through every single thing that could have happened in that situation. And to even try to get it right is foolhardy at best. So you're never going to remotely get there. But even if you wanted to like fan fiction it out, it would take a good deal of time, effort, and energy just to kind of put the pieces together as to how that could look. Ben, good to see you. I'm with you, Andy. I just don't see how anything more than a 7th or conditional 6th for Ja at best. You've said it. Why would a team want to take on that contract with how many games he plays? Yeah, I think that's the overarching feel from a lot of people, but it just takes one at the same time. Just takes one team. And maybe a better way to say it is it just takes 2 teams. If it just take one team, you're going to take what you can get. But if you get 2 teams that are battling against each other and say like, hey, you know, we do want this player. There's a theoretical argument to be made that he's the best corner on the market. It's such a tough argument to make because of the games missed, and you just can't count on, you know, almost anything from Jaire for how much he's going to play. But, you know, if the doctors clear him and you feel like the last 4 years were fluky, I mean, it's a long period of time to be fluky, but if you feel that way and you want to take the gamble on it, he's arguably, again, the best corner available, you know, via either free agency or trade. At least the argument can be made. So it just takes one team to kind of fall in love and say, yeah, we really want this guy. We think he can be a big time impact player. The contract's not terrible, especially with the way that the salary cap went up. It's possible. You know, I think it's probably in that 5th, 6th, 7th range, maybe even some conditions attached to it. I would be stunned if it's anything more than a 4th. Like that would be crazy talk to me. But again, just takes one team to be a little bit more ridiculous. Crazier things have happened. I'll put it that way. But I think it's definitely more in that late round pick range. Also, Team Rappaport, also why childish antics from adults? That I actually just asked that question. Yeah, you know, life is weird. Life is tough. I think sometimes, you know, even the best of us can get, you know, in weird situations and wrong moments and don't intend it to go that way. And, you know, there's a lot of passion in this industry, which is good. But sometimes that passion can overfill and you end up tweeting or saying or confronting someone in a Starbucks that you didn't mean to, or whatever the case may be. I don't know what happened there. You know, I think you can kind of read between the lines of, you know, what was going on Twitter yesterday with Rappaport and Schultz having differing opinions on what was going on with the Brady situation. Yeah, I don't know. You wish that stuff didn't happen, period. But in the scheme of all the stuff that's going on in the world, Ian Rappaport and Jordan Schultz getting in a verbal confrontation at a Starbucks in Indianapolis is probably about the bottom of the barrel of things to be worried about at the moment, would be my overall take on that. Curious to see this big season from LVN. If you could have any top premier player at a needed position right now, who would you choose? I'm still going Miles or Max for me personally. If you could have any top premier player at a needed position, Zach, you're going to have to probably clarify this a little bit. Like, are we talking that the age and the contract and everything like that matters as well, and the draft compensation that you're going to have to give out? So like, if I could just have Myles Garrett, I will take Myles Garrett. If I could just have Micah Parsons, I'll take Micah Parsons. If I have to consider that I'm giving up a crap ton for those guys, plus the salary and everything like that, then my answer might change a little bit. But Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett would be the 2 players I would love to add to any defense in the NFL, right? Like, those are 2 premier players. And of course, Micah in the prime of his career, you're going to get still 3-4 unbelievable years out of Myles Garrett. So those would be the 2 off the top of my head. Happy Thursday, Andy. Looking forward to heading down to the combine tomorrow. Do you think Kingsley will be back next season? He would be a quick way to create $3 million in cap space. Same with Dobbs. Yeah, both those guys, unless there's a trade of some form. I don't see either of those guys going anywhere. So they don't need the $3 million for either of those guys is a more than fair deal. Like, they would go for much more than that. Much more is maybe aggressive, but they go more than that on the open market. So I don't think you need to clear space for any reason. And yes, I'd expect Enigbari to be back. If Cooper, Bullard, and Williams fail to improve next year, is it time to consider that Matt LaFleur may not be the guy for a draft and develop team as good as he is otherwise? I think you just have to have the conversation of, is draft and develop still an attainable situation for any team? Like, I just think that you're going to have to work a little bit more to kind of figure out if Matt and his group are more focused always on the win now, which is the common theme within the NFL. There's not many developing teams through the course of a season. It just isn't. Like, the season is short. You have very little practice time, and your job in season is to win games. You may say it's like, oh, we've got a young team. We can develop these guys. Try telling that to the people who want to fire Matt LaFleur after every single loss, after every single game. It is a win or go home league. It is a what have you done for me lately league. So you love this idea that, oh yeah, we're going to take this year to really develop our young guys. That sounds great until you get the pressure of trying to win every single Sunday. And so during the week, you're game prepping, you're going through, game plans for that particular opponent, and you're making sure your players are prepared to go out and win football games. And Matt's done a phenomenal job of that overall. I mean, his regular season record speaks for itself. It's one of the best of all time. We're not talking about the best of the modern era. We're not talking to the best of right now. We're talking to one of the best regular season record coaches in the history of the NFL. He's awesome at that. So if it doesn't work out, where players continue to not develop over the course of their career in Green Bay in the Matt LaFleur era, that's not necessarily a Matt LaFleur problem, to be totally honest and transparent. You then have to have the conversation as an organization of, like, is this still the right matchup of, hey, we're going to draft and develop players, but we're going to have a win now mentality with our staff. Doesn't always work out perfectly that way, right? So that's not even me saying anything wrong with Matt. That's not me saying anything's wrong with Goody. It's just saying that they might be living a little bit on two different universes, and they've got to find a way to come together and say, all right, we've got a coach that's really great at winning now with the players that you give him. That's going to be his focus. That's going to be his mentality. So we can't take the LVNs of the world. They're not going to get better. Now, like the Edgerrin Cooper, for example, like that's, one that they were able to get better in real time last year. I think Anthony Campanelli deserves a ton of credit for that. Evan Williams, was phenomenal from basically day one. Like, you can find those players too. I don't know how much better, Cooper and Williams need to get. I think they're really great players already, but that might be more of the mentality that you have to go with of like, all right, we're not necessarily looking for these players that are going to be good 2 or 3 years from now, because we're probably not going to see the development from them that we're really hoping to see from this staff, because this is a win week to week sort of staff. I'll say it one more time. That's not the worst thing in the world, but it is if you're consistently getting draft and develop players with a staff that's more of a win now staff. So that just needs to be a bridge that you gap. I don't think it's either or at the moment. I don't think that is a massive issue. I don't think Goody has gone as much draft and develop as people might think. Jordan Love, Rashawn Gary, LVN, maybe Quay Walker a little bit, but Quay Walker started day one. It hasn't been quite as much as you think. Eric Stokes was ready day one. Devontae Wyatt was supposed to be the most NFL ready defensive tackle in that draft. It just kind of didn't work out that way. It hasn't been as draft and develop or just like all these project players that you might think. And as you get into like day 3 in the draft and things like that, it's more than fine to take flyers on those type of players if you think they have big upside. That's a totally fine thing to do at that stage of the draft. So, and again, I think we've seen Green Bay develop some players as well. Tucker Kraft and Edgerrin Cooper are phenomenal examples of that. The progress that Tucker Kraft and Edgerrin Cooper made from the beginning of their rookie seasons to the end of their rookie seasons was unbelievable. I mean, massive, massive upgrades. Rasheed Walker is a great example of a player that's developed in Green Bay. Sean Ryan over the last couple of seasons has taken some momentous steps in the right direction. So, or monumental steps, you know what I mean? Either way, like there have been players that have progressed. Jordan Love has progressed through his time in Green Bay to a significant extent. I can't tell you guys how lost Jordan was as a rookie, like completely lost. I mean, it was check down or nothing from Jordan for really the first like year and a half of his career. It was nothing down the field, didn't know how to read the defense, didn't know how to go through progressions, was jittery as hell, and just check down. It was like, check down. Like it was bad. Like the level of upgrade that he has made through his time in Green Bay is monumental as well. So it's not that this staff has not developed players in their time in Green Bay. I think that is a false pretense to go off of. And I don't think Goody has just draft and develop guys. There have been those guys, but it hasn't just been those either. And I think overall, they've done a good job. I mean, the transition from the Rodgers era to the Love era with the youngest team in football for 2 consecutive years, making the playoffs in back-to-back years is not nothing. That is a still pretty impressive accomplishment. When you go from a Hall of Fame quarterback and trade them away and go to the youngest team in football for back-to-back seasons, you are usually not making a good turnaround and all of a sudden being a playoff team for 2 consecutive years. That is mostly unheard of. So I think there's still a lot of positives there. But if your question stands and you start seeing players that are not progressing and more players are taking steps back than steps forward, then I just think you have to get a little bit more on the same page of what players are we bringing in and how can we make it so that we're getting players that are maybe a little bit more ready-made coming in so that this staff can put them in the system and help them win right away rather than maybe taking that time to develop them quite as much. But I don't think it's there yet. Sorry, it's a long-winded answer, but I think it's worth going over. Hope your draft weekend plans include live streaming all the way to the end of day 3. The final few hours of last year's show might be my favorite thing that you've ever done. I don't remember that. What did I do, Ryan? I don't think I think I did like just a small one on day 3. If I remember correctly, I did day 1 live. And was it just me on day 1? I think it was just me on day 1. Or maybe I had Andrew and Maggie with me. I'd have to go back and look. And then I know day 2, I think I had like Andrew and Maggie and a few other people that joined me. And then I would go and make the quick videos once Green Bay made their selections. And then I would come back on. And then I thought day 3, I just came on for like an hour. I don't remember exactly, to be honest, but I'd be curious as to what I did that was your favorite thing ever, because I don't remember it. Maybe that's why it was a really funny or great thing, is because maybe I was blacked out and just on fumes at that point. I can tell you the gist of what I'm doing without maybe getting into specifics. Wednesday during the day, and I'm not going to go into the details of this because it's not my place to do so. I believe Cheesehead TV is having an event during the day that my plan as of now is to attend that during the day. Wednesday night, I know for sure from 7 to 9, and it'll probably go past 9 o'clock as well, but I'm going to be hosting a live Q&A downtown Green Bay. It's going to be awesome. So that's going to be a ton of fun. That'll be in person. That will not be online. That'll not be on the internet. That's going to be an in-person live Q&A. Thursday during the day, I will host a live pre-draft Q&A online at some point, probably a couple hour during the day. And then once the draft starts, I will go live and I will stream the full Thursday night live. I'm guessing that I might go, I don't know. I don't know if I'll go solo or if I'll maybe have a couple guests on, but I'll absolutely be live streaming here for the entirety of Thursday night. Friday during the day, I will do another live stream during the day to recap what happened the night before, as well as kind of preview day 2. I will do completely live through day 2 again. I will probably try to have a couple people on with me, so when Green Bay makes selections, I can go and make those quick videos to post to YouTube and to post to the audio channels as well. And then from there, I will wrap up and end day 2. And then I do think this year I'm going to try to do something live on day 3, although I might do something similar where I don't know if I'll go live the entire time for day 3, but I may do, pieces of it or things like that. I might go live for a little bit. Then when they make a pick, I might go make the video and then come back live, and we'll see. I'm not exactly sure on day 3 yet. And then my goal right now is to either do a live Q&A or a meet and greet somewhere on Saturday night following the draft as well. That will be in person. I'm working with a couple different venues right now to figure out what might make the most sense, but I do believe that will happen in some capacity. Just not sure where, just not sure time, and just not sure if it's more a Q&A or if it's more a meet and greet or what we're going to do with that. But there will be something hopefully live on Saturday night in person as well. And then more back to our kind of just usually scheduled program following that. So that is my current plan. And then the week before the draft, Aaron Nagler and I will also be doing a live draft Q&A at the Timber Rattlers game in Appleton on that Thursday night, immediately the week before the draft, exactly 1 week before the draft. So that should be a ton of fun as well. So tickets are available for that. Get your T-Rats tickets, and then I'll keep you guys posted on everything else that I'm doing over the course of the next handful of weeks as we get closer and closer to the draft as well. Alex, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate that a ton. Just realized not a member as long, but I started watching your videos around this time a year ago. Time flies. That's awesome, Ben. You've been awesome. Tons of great questions. So I really appreciate all the support. From a millennial enjoying this pod every single day. Hope to see you in the draft. Not far from Kenosha. Not from Kenosha. Awesome. I don't think I'm going to be at the draft on Thursday, Friday, Saturday because I need to be here. and need to be, kind of available for the live Q&A and then breaking down picks when they happen. But I will definitely be there Wednesday night and hopefully Saturday night as well. Ian, another reason why we need MVS. Every MVP, Super Bowl MVP since 2020 has played with MVS that year. That's a great stat. That's unbelievable, actually. Call me crazy, but I low-key want Paulson over Byron Murphy Jr. I don't think that's crazy at all. I actually do think I like Paulson a little bit more as well. And I think Paulson's going to be a little bit cheaper. He's younger. So I'd be fine with either. But Murphy's got some deficiencies in his game, specifically from a tackling standpoint. So I would actually be probably for Paulson in that situation as well. Would it be possible to re-up on Zach Tom and add some money to this year's cap? No. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no without knowing the exact answer to that, but I can tell you in a second. Zach's set to make $3.4 million this year. If you're going to sign him to an extension, you're not giving him anything less than $3.4 million this year. In fact, you're probably adding to his salary cap this year. That would be my guess on it. So it's possible that you could do it while keeping the same salary cap or something right around there. But no, there's no significant savings to be made. And you don't need, Green Bay doesn't need to do that right now. They have plenty of salary cap space. I think the harder thing is going to be to find the players that they want to use the salary cap space on than it is to have enough salary cap space. So I think that's going to be the bigger issue, but they could absolutely and probably should absolutely sign him to an extension sooner rather than later, but it's not going to open up any windfall of salary cap space this season. The only player I liked at the time taking from a division rival was Adrian Amos. I thought he was a good dude and very reliable. Man, I love that free agent signing. He was really, really good the first, 3 years. That last year in Green Bay was definitely a little bit of a downward slope, but his first 3 years in Green Bay were fantastic. Really fun player. And that was a really, really good signing by Brian Gutekunst. Julius Peppers too. That was a good one as well. Feels like Ja has more value to other teams than to Green Bay. Feels inevitable that they'll trade him and he'll be motivated and play well and probably fight through more than he would for Green Bay. Could be. And again, this could easily end up in a situation where Green Bay trades him for pennies on the dollars and he goes out and has a great season this year. Maybe it happens that way. It does feel like both sides need to kind of go in a different direction. And it feels like it's the time to do so, right? So we'll see what ultimately happens. I don't think that it's a wrong decision now if he goes out and has that great year, because that that's a possibility, but you're playing the percentages, you're playing the odds. You're basically acting as the casino in the situation. You're putting your money down on that he's not going to play as many games as you would like him to. Sometimes you make the perfect read in poker and you know what your opponent has and you know what you have, and you've got an 80% chance of victory, and the turn card just doesn't come the way that you want. Happens. Happens to the best of us, right? So I think Goody's making the right read based on the hand that he's dealt right now. He might get a bad beat on it. He might, but you make the right read more often through the course of time and you're going to end up in the money. That's what he's trying to do. And that, I think it's the right read right now. Might get the wrong turn card, and Jaire might go and tear it up with another team and might have egg on his face. He knows that, but I think it's the right decision at the time. And that's all you can do. So all you can do is make the right decision at the time and hope it ends up the way that you want it to. And I think that's what he's doing here. Thank you for reminding me on the Peppers one for sure. I think Bears fans are cute, and Adam Rankin is ridiculous. At least he leans into it. There's a difference between Adam Rankin. Who's the other Bears guy for, why can't I think of his name? He's the worst. Yeah, I forget his name. Doesn't matter. But there's another one too. At least Rank leans into it and kind of knows what he's doing and picking against the Packers and picking the Bears every week. It's a shtick more for him. Adam Shine. Is that what his name is? Yeah, Adam Shine. That dude sucks. That guy's, yeah. I don't know what his deal is. Latest rumor seems that Raiders will get Stafford, and then that opens Rodgers and Devontae to LA. Yes, it's Slayton time. Raiders will get Stafford, and then it opens Rodgers. Yeah, I think that could be the case. I don't know that Slayton, again, really moves the needle all that much. If I could have MVS for $2 million, I would take that over Slayton for $10 million or $8 million or even $6 million. But yeah, maybe could easily be the case. He was my prediction for Green Bay, but I'm not necessarily hoping that ends up being the case. Tyleik Williams looks good at the combine today. Same with Shamar Stewart. Yeah, Stewart was a freak today. I feel like we were missing a lot of the explosive intermediate passing plays that were successful in 2023 this year. With the addition of Jacobs, I think Matt LaFleur was less creative than he normally is. I disagree with the less creative. I think it was different creative. I think the run game he created for Jacobs was immensely creative. I just think he struggled a little bit more with plays that worked off of the running game that was set up for Josh Jacobs. And I do think that there was less times where Matt was able to scheme people open with ease. Like there were times in 2023 where it's just like, oh, yep, another dude that's wide ass open. Like that's sweet. You didn't see that as much as in 2024. So they're going to have to just figure that out. Teams, I think, spent a lot of time studying Matt LaFleur and his offense in 2024. I think they started to catch up to it a little bit. Now it's going to be time for Matt to make that next, progression with his offense, his next evolution, and we'll see what that brings in 2025. Rodgers and Tay to LA Rams literally makes no sense to me. Moving on from Stafford, I totally agree, Ben. Don't get it in any way, shape, or form. Jacobs wasn't dominating, the offense would fall off. I don't know. We have quite a few data points since the Matt LaFleur era, and even Jordan Love the year before, that even when Jordan Love was playing without Aaron Jones for some of those games, it wasn't like this complete train wreck of an offense. So I don't think that that's a fair assessment, Ian. I think Jacobs playing well was a really key part of last year, but my guess is they'd evolve and they'd find ways. And guess what? I also like Marshawn Lloyd, Emmanuel Wilson, Chris Brooks. I think they've got a good core of running backs too. It was a huge part of who they were last year, but I think they're going to look different in 2025, plus probably add some players in 2025 as well. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but Jacobs was clearly a huge part of what they did this past year. Doesn't matter how creative, non-creative you are if your receivers are having butterfingers, quarterbacks throwing inaccurately, if your offensive line's not protecting the way that they should. And that's where we go back to that question from earlier of it's just a little bit of everyone. It's not any one player having an abysmal season. It's not anyone that needs to be a superhero, just everyone just playing a little bit better, having a little bit better focus, a little bit more attention to detail. Also would mean Max Crosby. I think Max Crosby is going to be off the market anyway. I really do. I don't think he's going anywhere. Post June 1st cut, Stafford saves the Rams so much money this year and next. Rodgers and Adams also don't make sense, but moving on from Stafford does. Yeah, but it doesn't sound like they're going to post June 1st cut Stafford. It sounds like they're going to trade him soon. So that doesn't necessarily solve that part of the equation either, Ian. But I don't know. We'll see what they have in mind, and maybe it works out for them. Time will tell. Yeah, Ben, we agree there. The idea of the Rams wanting Jimmy G to start over Stafford is, I don't know. That doesn't make any sense either. In a vacuum, what would make the team better immediately? Trade the first for Myles Garrett or get Josh Sweat in free agency and draft a player with the pick. If it's just a first, give me Myles Garrett. No question about it. If it's like 20 mil for Sweat or like 30 mil for Garrett plus the first round pick, even a first in LVN, I'll take Myles Garrett in that situation. How can J Love stay consistent in his footwork this season? I feel like even coming off of injury, it was better than what it was towards the end of the season. A couple things. I think obviously health has a lot to do with it. And then just practicing week in and week out, I think that's going to help a ton. I think if you can keep him a little bit more clean in the pocket, that would help as well. It's a lot easier to play with good mechanics when you're not pressured. When you're pressured, you tend to kind of go back to your default settings, if you will, and those mechanics start to go a little bit more. So I think, frankly, Jordan just has a little bit of that in him no matter what. I don't think it's ever going to be solved entirely, but, keep him healthy. Let him practice every week, every practice date, continue to work on it. And then at the same time, just protect him as much as possible and you'll see an improvement of it. But I think it's always going to be there to some extent, at least a little bit. If you had to take a luxury pick somewhere in the 3rd to the 5th round, what position would you want? Linebacker in that situation. Linebacker, maybe like a safety linebacker hybrid. I'm fine with another tight end as well. I wouldn't hate that. So yeah, I don't think a running back, although it's a really strong running back draft. So if you get a really good one, go for it. Just take good football players and the rest will kind of work itself out over time. My ball's itch. Good to see you. Have you ever heard Goody or Murphy complaining about the tush push, or is Murphy taking a bullet for the owners and GMs? Murphy has specifically complained about it in his Ask 5 column. So I think he genuinely does not like it. I think he may be, I don't know if taking a bullet, but just kind of being the guy that is saying like, yeah, I'll put it out there. He put it out there himself anyway. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but I think Murphy legitimately does not like it. I don't think Goody probably cares. I don't understand the worry about Jaire elsewhere in the NFC North. Just run the ball directly at him. End of worry. Fair point. Green Bay drafts and signs a corner. Evan Williams improves and Nixon goes inside. What does Green Bay do with Javon Bullard? I don't think Nixon goes inside. I think you could end up in situations where in more obvious passing situations, maybe Nixon moves inside and Bullard's off the field. In more like early nickel situations, Nixon's outside and Bullard's in the slot. I think it gives you some versatility, but I think Bullard will have a spot. I think the big nickel will probably suit him a little bit better this year. I think he'll also be a primary depth piece at the safety position, but you kind of worry about that later. Just get good players, let them compete, and the best 5 defensive backs should be on the field. And if that's Bullard, great. If it's not, you figure out the rest later. So I'm less concerned about that. Go get your good defensive backs first, put them in positions to be successful, and then see who ultimately, takes the bull by the horns and runs with it and really makes you the best defense you can possibly be. All right. We just went over that. They fix the pass rush. This defense could legitimately be scary. I don't even say like fix if they just add a little bit to that, right? You add one more premier pass rusher in there or just a good pass rusher. Yeah, it's going to take a step forward. It should, but they also can't take a step back with run defense. They're going to have that same attention to detail. Teams are going to have a second year or like a year of tape, I should say, on Jeff Hafley and what he likes to do defensively. So yeah, I think it's going to change some things, and every year is a little bit different, like Matt LaFleur likes to say, and there will be new challenges that come up in this upcoming season. Transright's good to see you, my friend. Totally agree with you on the run defense. It was weird and exciting to watch. Yeah, we're not used to that for sure. Could Enagbari be a trade candidate? Brent looked good, and if we signed a veteran draft one, snap counts could be tough to find. I don't think so. I don't know how much of an appetite there's going to be. I was not a fan of how Enagbari played this past year, but I think the most likely scenario is he just stays. Again, you're probably not getting anything of value for him from a trade standpoint anyway. You could get to maybe like cut down time. And let's say they go out and get a Josh Sweat, and you've got Sweat that's out there, Gary that's out there, and maybe LVN is taking a step forward, and Brenton Cox looks really good, and Mosby looks like he can be that number 5. Yeah, you could get into a situation where if some team's willing to give a 6th-round pick for Enagbari or something, you're like, sure, we'll take that. We'll take the draft capital, open up open up some salary cap space and open up the roster position for somebody else. And you probably feel comfortable in that situation, but you can usually not have enough pass rushers. And I think Enagbari is certainly good enough to be a number 4, number 5 edge rusher on any team in the NFL, including the Packers. Am I concerned that Matt LaFleur was ranked 20th? No, I am not, simply because he graded as an A-, which was actually better than his B+ from a season ago. An A- is a good grade regardless. Now, compared to his peers, it was worse. He was 20th out of 32. So I get that. But if it was even like a B-, B, and it was, like 20th or whatever, I have a little bit more of an issue with it. You're not comparing these, right? It's not like the Packers players are comparing their notes to the Vikings players and so on and so forth. They're just grading it how they see it. And an A- for one team might be a B+ for another team, might be a B- for another team. It's tough to say. So A- to me for them grading Matt is more than a good enough grade, and it doesn't give me any real cause for concern at this point in time. Do you think Jaire would demand a new contract if he were traded, and how would that impact what the Packers could get for him? Impossible to say. I don't think he would. I think he's got to be fairly satisfied with the contract that he's on. He's certainly not getting more. So no, I don't think so. And I think the team would be well aware of where he stood on a contract before trading for him. Sometime it would be cool to make a live event. Yeah, hopefully you can make it at some point, Ben. That'd be awesome. I suck at poker, to be honest. It's not for everyone. This is a weird but true story. I swear to you on both of these things. I am a god-awful poker player when I am sober. And I somehow am an unbelievable poker player when I am drunk. It makes no sense. I played my best hand of poker ever, won a huge hand. I was in New Orleans for a wedding. I walked into the casino in New Orleans. Was it Bally's? Hammered, just hammered with money, and sitting down at a poker table and played an unbelievable session. I still remember I had pocket aces. He had I think it was like ace king, and I ended up with aces over kings. He ended up with kings over aces, and took a ton of money from the hand. I mean, I don't think I got back to my hotel room till like 5 a.m. I won a ton of money. It was like they said, like the best poker hand I've ever played in my life. It was awesome. You always remember your losses. You very rarely remember your wins. That is one win that I will remember for forever. Hammered, sober, suck, totally suck. Can't play. I have a theory as to why as well. Went to Vegas for the draft, played at MGM Grand, played in a poker tournament at the MGM Grand, just signed up for one randomly. It was, I think, the night before, I think it was Wednesday night before the draft, and won the whole damn tournament. It wasn't like this huge tournament. It was probably like 50 players or whatever, but won the whole damn tournament. Just drunk the entire time. The next day I went and played a little bit sober, lost easily. My theory on this, and I think it's actually legitimate. When I am sober at the poker table, I am bored. So I want to play more hands. And I play hands all the time that I probably should not play. And when I'm drunk, I'm just vibing. I'm having a good time. Everyone's at the table having fun. I can have a conversation with people, and it's just a good vibe, good energy. Oh, I've got a 10-8 offsuit. Throw it in. No problem. We'll wait for the next one. I think I'm very easygoing and waiting for more premium hands when I'm drunk. You would think it's the opposite, right? You would think sober, all right, I'm very smart, analytical. I'm going to play only premium hands. Sorry, this is the long ass answer that you probably don't need to know. But I think I'm going to play, premium hands only. No, I get bored. So I'm going to, screw it. I'm going to play this hand. And it's a hand I shouldn't play. And drunk, I'm more like, screw that one. I'll wait till the next one. And I play much more tight when I'm drunk. It makes no sense. It's completely the antithesis of what you would think, but I think it's actually legitimately true. And the results would absolutely speak to that. So that's my take on poker. Sorry for the long answer. Goody has always been one of the best GMs at letting go of players at the right time. I think that's true. I'm trying to think if there's a player. I don't think there's any player that you could make a real, I'm sure there's somebody that I'm just not thinking of that made like was a really good player once they left Green Bay for another team. Rodgers had a decline. Devontae had some level of decline after he left. Devondre Campbell certainly did not play well this past year. I'd have to think about it. Rasul played a really good, year and a half, or I guess a year in Buffalo, but definitely fell off this year. So I'd have to think about it, but it doesn't seem like he's made any massive mistakes in that regard. I could easily be forgetting someone though. No, it wasn't Nick Wright. Adam Rank is a troll, but again, at least he leans into it. Is Adam's a Bears fan? I didn't know that. Yeah, Adam Shine is a Bears fan. Yes. Next time someone gets time with Goody, they should ask if draft and develop is dead or if they feel like they need to adjust their approach. Could certainly ask him that. A couple of times in the Ask 5 column over the past couple of years, if we talked about that. Did we ever get a follow-up on his elbow injury? I know it didn't seem to like a big deal in the Eagles game. Those nerve issues can linger. Who are we talking about there, Nate? Sorry, I'm not sure what the context is there. I like the idea of being able to flex Bullard Nixon on the inside depending on matchups. I think they're going to keep Nixon a lot more on the outside. I don't think he's going to see much time on the inside unless it's an emergency situation. And I think they'll draft somebody else or pick up somebody else that could be that other corner in the slot if they need them to be. Outside of trades for an elite pass rusher, how does Green Bay add an elite player this offseason? Hopefully via the draft. They're overdue for I guess Edgerrin Cooper is certainly one, but they're overdue for a first round pick that just comes in and plays at an elite level right away. That would be nice. I don't know. Elite is probably not a great chance of happening unless you sign maybe a Khalil Mack and he still plays at that level. But I think they're going to get some, hopefully really good to great players that are going to add to the high level talent on this team. Who that is, it remains to be seen, but I think elite's going to be very hard to pull off this offseason unless they find it via the draft. Also with Nixon Bullard thing, you have depth there in case no one gets stinged up. I think you're going to want depth more a little bit too. What you did during day three of draft, you guys were all a little punch drunk and got silly. Awesome. I'm all for that. Anytime. Would feel like a waste though. No, using a second round pick on a backup safety and a sub on a nickel back. I get it's still early, but he wasn't that great late last season. I still have a lot of faith in Javon Bullard. I think he's still going to be a really good player. We need a live pack-a-day poker tournament sometime, apparently. Make Andy have some drinks, answer questions, and play poker. I'm all in. That sounds like a ton of fun, actually. We're going to hear the greatest Eric Stokes and Quay Walker rant ever. Maybe at some point. There we go. Reed had an injury. It sounds like he's going to be ready to go by training camp is what it sounds like. Nate's comment about Jordan Love's injury in the Bear. Oh, gotcha. It sounds like Jordan's going to be fine. If we hear something different, maybe that changes the connotation a little bit, but it sounds like he's going to be just fine. Missed the majority of this one and we'll miss the rest since I'm working, but just had to stop and say thanks for all you do, Andy. Keep up the fantastic work. King Kermit, you are more than welcome, my friend. Thanks so much for that. I got massacred on another forum for saying that if Edgerrin Cooper stays healthy, he could be a top 2, not 2 inside linebacker in the league next year. Jumping to number 1's probably aggressive, but I'm not putting any ceiling on Edgerrin Cooper. That dude can play. And if he just gets a little bit more consistency, look the hell out because he's as talented as any linebacker in the league. Ben will make the drinks. That sounds perfect. All right, friends, I do have to get out of here. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you guys a ton. Thank you for being members. You're the absolute best. I'll see you tomorrow for the happy hour Q&A, 3 p.m. Central Time. I should go about 45 minutes tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.